What's up, humans? Welcome back to episode 42 of the Human Music Podcast, How to Start Producing a Song. Now, on this episode, your three illustrious hosts will each tell you how they most like to start producing a song, and we'll also cover Mozart, Beethoven, do prodigies exist, time travel DJ gigs, outliers, and mentorship, and a little bit more. So, before we get started, make sure you go support our sponsors. First off, the EDM Cookbook, ill.Gates 4 essential songwriting recipes, and how to cook songs faster using timer beats. Then once you got songs written, you'll need some coaching from Seth Drake, the best engineer we know. Your first class is free over at Guest Practices with Seth Drake. And then once the songs are ready, you're going to need distribution. I highly recommend Bounce Gang's Gvngaroo Records music distribution, where you can get unlimited uploads for under $10. All right, without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Hello, people of Earth. This is Tesko with Rip Kenny and Trap Jesus, and you're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Human Music Podcast. I like it. What's up, humans? Human Music Podcast time. Luke Rain here with my good friends Tesko and Rip Kenny, about to talk music nerd shit like we always do. What's up, our fellow music nerds? Today we're going to talk about how do you go about starting a song? The all-important question that has plagued producers forever.
For eons, literally for eons. I guarantee Beethoven and all them OGs were like, man, how do I start this freaking sonata? I need to figure out how I get this sonata going a little better.
Yeah, but Mozart didn't worry about it. He just wrote shit like a little asshole prodigy he was.
No, so I heard Mozart actually, like, his dad. Someone needs to fact check me on this because I'm gonna start talking right out of my ass. So I heard Mozart's dad, because he started doing stuff. He wrote his first symphony when he was like 8 or something like that. His dad had been writing symphonies his entire life, and that seems a little sus to me. Where like some kid who, in all rights, probably doesn't have the capacity to think in the scale of orchestration and arrangement and composition, like the brass or the not brass, but the like the low bass and cellos need to be playing in the right register, and all these things need to operate perfectly together. And this little kid is just like nailing all that. I feel like there was probably some guidance there that was not talked about so much, that kind of maybe got under the table, and he became the prodigy of all prodigies when he maybe had a little bit of help from Pops. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, maybe there's a little ghost producer action there. But I also think, what was there to do in those times besides like
that part,
catch the plague and get a little spanky spank if you didn't want to do whatever your parents told you. So I also think it's possible, make dank sonatas.
There was no TV to park your kid in front of to babysit while you went and wrote a symphony. It was like, well, I got to sit here and write a symphony. That means his mom's got to go, like, I don't know, milk a cow or something, whatever you did back then. And then
churn butter.
Yeah, right. And then, it's like, well, you obviously got the fake job, Mr. Musician. So you got to take care of the kid while you do that weird writing little notes on paper. And, your kid's just sitting there with you. There's nothing else to look at. The kid's like, Dad, what's that? Oh, that's a eighth note. That's a bass clef. That's all the kid knows. Plus, you get it. You add that to a precocious child with some innate ability. It's in his family line.
Yeah.
The whole since been composing. I think Mozart. I think, for sure he had a leg up by having a dad that was doing it the whole time, and, teachers. And I'm sure, if you can afford to just be a composer, you're probably like decently middle class at that point.
Mhm.
And then, you know, you can hire some music teachers to teach them some other stuff. And then, all right, kid, now you've seen how it's done for 8. If you did something for 8 years and you couldn't do it by then, what's wrong with you?
Man, the real question is, how did Beethoven write while he was deaf? That's like that's the one that really astounds me. I can understand the Mozart.
You ain't never
one,
drew
but
into MIDI without playing it, without having to play on the MIDI?
I have, but like sometimes it comes out like ass, and inevitably, like you hit that one wrong note. Like, how did he know? Like, I wonder if he had somebody being like, "Oh no, like move this note down" or something. They're like, but
I
to
mean, he
like
didn't start deaf.
flawlessly. Yeah, but still, like,
Yeah, dumb band. He writing music. He hears it in his head. He knows what the note feels like.
but think about this. All of your life, you've been making music, right? Now, if you go deaf and you're just writing in MIDI, how confident are you going to feel in that? I can make sure everything's in scale, but as far as like, you know, like
Yeah, no, I see.
those key signature changes and shit, feeling a little sketchy. You know what I'm saying?
Like, well, I mean, he definitely would like write something and then like, you know, text it to his homie. If he gets fire emojis back, then he's like,
Text to be a carrier pigeon.
You
The
imagine
pigeon
just
brings
like
back fire
opening
emojis.
opening a letter sealed with wax, and you open it, it's just 3 flames. Like, I think he liked it.
or he tried to
Like,
burn the letter. I'm not sure.
Burn after reading. There's no text. I guess burn before reading.
Right. So I guess the question then is it fair play? Like, is it as impressive if your dad helped you and like you still did most of the thing? Like, is that still worthy of prodigy status? Because you're kind of, you know, Dad, can we write a 9/16 time signature today? Like, and if you pulled it off, like, is that still? Does he have an asterisk next to his early works?
How do you feel about that?
I don't know, man. The thing is, like, having a teacher or a mentor is so important. Like, I don't really care who it is, if it's your dad or whatever. Great. It's probably better for you and you get started early. Like, that's awesome. I just think that, like, it's just a time overtold tale of everyone assuming that this prodigy is just gifted with the will of God to write music from birth, or this overnight success is this random incredible kid with talent that just shit out the world's best thing everyone's ever heard last night and now he's famous. Like, no, none of that stuff happens by accident. Like, you had expert coaching, or you've been working at it for 10 years, and then this one thing that you just tried under a new name or whatever, like, pops off, and everyone assumes that, like, that he was touched by an angel and this thing happened. Like, it's just never the case. Just like, have you guys read the book Peak?
I don't think I've read that one. No.
So it's by the dude that wrote the thing that then, I forget who, the 10,000 hour.
Yeah, talk about Malcolm Gladwell, and that one was called Outliers.
Yeah, basically took what this dude originally wrote and bastardized it and said 10,000 hours is what it takes to become an expert in anything. And this guy's who did the research is like, no, actually, like, that's not what I said. That's besides the point. The dude that did the research that Malcolm Gladwell bastardized wrote this book, Peak, which is essentially how anyone can use and leverage their skill. Like, what is the framework for learning something that is as efficient as you can be to get world class? And one of the things that he talks about is that it's all a system. It's all concerted work over time, following a certain framework that lands you at this skill. And he goes back and dissects a few people that everyone assumed was a prodigy. This one high jumper that, like, like the prototypical example apparently was this one high jumper that everyone was like, this kid never high jumped in his life. And then all of a sudden he breaks onto the scene and is like absolutely killing it. Apparently this kid had been doing like some other form of like jumping. I don't remember the specific example, but essentially he breaks down how all of these prototypical examples of people that hold on a pedestal as breakout experts that had gifted skill sets and go and reverse engineers like their history and stuff and goes, no, they've been doing this thing for a long time. It's just easier for everyone to assume that they're incredibly gifted because that would mean that they couldn't do it. And because they haven't done it, it's easier to think I'm not the type of person that would be capable of doing that, because it's easier to let yourself off the hook thinking that you couldn't, rather than putting in the countless unnamed hours of you beating your head against the wall to actually get to that point, right? So I guess that's my thought in a very long circle.
That's a big old nutshell, man. It's a giant almond.
Man, on a side note, do you think if you could go back to that time and bring like a Pioneer like setup and some speakers, you think they would burn you at the stake if you just DJ'd out a whole EDM set?
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like
if you took a Pioneer setup to the Pioneer times.
Yeah.
Where would you plug? First off, where are you plugging that in? You got to bring an entire generator and enough gas to keep it going. Don't even get me started on the light rig.
Yeah, PK is probably going to have an issue with you writing a time travel clause into the contract to borrow that Trinity setup. They're probably not going to be super down with you taking that stuff through a portal.
You take it back to before PK existed, so you can't really get sued at that point.
Oh, true. Yeah, you could write a clause before they wrote your clause.
Even in current times, people were like, Skrillex is devil music. Like, if you listen to that, you're cursed. Like, I can only imagine how quickly they would burn you if you showed up and played a bunch of bro step to a bunch of symphony goers.
If you played the blues to them, they would burn you.
Absolutely.
You don't have to go
That's
back
funny.
that far. Yo, to circle back onto that, like the peak and Outliers stuff, like talking about, Prodigies, like, so in Outliers, a lot of that book, I think the 10,000 hours being some sort of concrete number even gets blown up from what he said about it in that book, it gets oversimplified and becomes the meme. But in that book, a lot of it is about like, okay, we've got this weird statistic that most professional baseball players were born in this 3-month window of the year, regardless of what age they are. Or, and it's like, wait, why? Oh, because the cutoff date for what age group you're in is here. So the oldest 3 months of people, when you're 5 years old, have another, 5th or 6th amount of life and physical development and hand-eye coordination by the time they get to their first baseball camp. And so then they're the good ones. So they get more attention. They get more playing time. Then they get bumped up to the special league that plays more games, that has more practices, that has a longer season, that has better coaches. And then they get to go to the playoffs, which extends another few, so it's like, then they get to this arbitrary number of 10,000 hours of playing time way sooner. And by that time, a bunch of these kids who were, like, oh man, I guess I wasn't that good at baseball, just because they didn't get that accidental bump, just like decided to quit and do something else. And so thinking about that, like, does that invalidate the fact that the people that did become dope baseball players or hockey players or whatever other sport, because pretty much every sport that exists, does that invalidate Michael Jordan because he got a leg up when he was, when he was 5 at, getting a little more basketball practice than another kid who didn't end up in the NBA, because he still ended up being the best basketball player of the people that made it to the NBA. So like, it's interesting. Like there's always, and you kind of alluded to this, Evan, like there's no vacuum. You don't just learn to write symphonies in an environment that doesn't have symphonies. You know, like maybe you take the symphonies to a new level or to a crazy direction. You put your twist on it that nobody did, and you influence it with this other thing that hadn't quite been mashed up before. But like nothing happens in a vacuum, and nobody learns shit without mentorship. So, you know, it's like we were all blessed to find ill.Gates at, you know, good moments for us to find ill.Gates. And that really accelerated our learning and our ability to then be influential to other people who we are able to coach now. And so it's like all of that happens inside of an ecosystem of a music community.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting too, like, we're the only animal, like, it's only this specific type of monkey that we are that can look at other monkeys like us and be like, oh, that monkey did that and that happened. So either I'm going to do that thing better or I'm not going to do that. Whereas other animals sort of have to make mistakes to learn, you know, to not do something, or they have to, you know, go through the process once to like integrate that this is something that can be done. And, you know, I think about that a lot because it's like, if you imagine everything that you know now, if you had to learn that by yourself in a quote unquote vacuum, like you said, how far into your lifetime would you have to get before you actually knew all these things versus like, you know, if your dad wrote symphonies and he's just like, hey, you know, here's a really good way to start it, or, you know, make sure these two notes are next to each other, or don't do awkward phrasing like this. It's like everything, even all the music we're doing now is just an extension off of that. But for somebody to create like bass music in their lifetime, if they had to go through every iteration of music, that shit just wouldn't be possible. So it really is about that iterative approach and taking advantage of, you know, like finding mentors and stuff. Like at this point, I find it kind of laughable that somebody would ever suggest like, don't get a mentor, or like, oh yeah, you know, that's cool for other people, but like, I don't need one. And it's like, that is like one of the distinguishing factors of what makes humans humans, is that they can, you know, look forward into the future with experiences of other people, not only like, you know, visually through seeing something happen, not only through talking to people, but like we can immortalize some of these teachings, you know, for the most part, immortalize like in a book or something, or put it on the internet and take all of that collectively and then make informed decisions moving forward. So, you know, I think like just as much as Mozart had his dad maybe to be like, you know, do this or don't do this, he also had all of his work that he had done previously where he could like refer to examples. And it's not like you could just dig up that MIDI on the internet, you know, or like check up on Reddit, see what people are talking about, or, you know, pull up Spotify and pull a fucking Etude 15 from this dude and Sonata 12 from this dude and references. So like,
but I mean, they had written music and they had people that were like music theory teachers, you know.
But even still, to have that sort of catalog of you know, like symphonies and stuff available to you, and especially if, you know, you're bored as hell trying not to catch the plague and fucking, I don't know what people did in that
so
time.
You're saying times have not changed. It's basically exactly 2021. Everybody's sitting around bored as hell trying not to catch the plague.
But now we got Reddit, now we got YouTube, now we got all these distractions. But imagine if all you had was a fat stack of symphonies to read through. Like, I bet I would have got through that shit 20 times over, just like you guys. And imagine, you know, how good we would have got off of that if we didn't, you know, spend some nights watching some Netflix and doing this and that. If we were just doing music and our dads were, you know, just as deep into that, like,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's talk about producers. Let's talk about producers, because iStandard is a huge, you know, beat battle community. There's all these sick producers around, right? And, you know, there's people that have been doing this for, you know, years. They're in their 20s, they're in their 30s, you know, out here, you know, competing. And then a few years back, this kid from Dallas named Brown Royal came through and won it at 17 years old. And there's another cat, named Von Beats, who is also like one of the best people in that scene. He never quite won it, but he's, you know, also one of the best. And you're like, damn, how does a 17-year-old come out here and just like smoke all of these, you know, 20 something and 30 something year olds who've been doing it, you know, objectively longer than him? And it's like, well, A, he's a super hard worker. He's got a really dope ear for things. He studies the sounds that really work and he puts his shit together really well. B, his dad and all of his dad's friends are like super producers, like super dope, super knowledgeable, kind of the heads of a big community of producers and musicians in the Dallas area. And so they all, you know, this group of kids came up inside of this ecosystem of people who are super dope producers, always freely sharing super dope producer knowledge around their community. Like, and all they had to do was be a little interested, and their entire lives, from the time they were born, their dads were making music. Their whole families were in on it. You know, like I got another homie, DQ Hampton, who's a part of Bounce Gang, super dope rapper. You know, and I was like, damn, man, you're like really doing this shit. And he's like, well, man, you know, thank you, but also I'm second generation hip hop. You know, like my dads were in rap groups, and you know, my uncle, you know, started this label and this thing over here, and so we've got all this community. So I didn't have to build everything by myself and learn everything from the ground up. I came up in a culture where a lot of people knew stuff and they passed on the knowledge. And I don't think that takes anything away from what these guys have accomplished, the young cats. It is really a testament to what we all need to be creating for the next generation, is this community. And with the internet, especially, like, we should do it locally if possible, but with the internet, it's even more possible. You know, big ups to Dylan for creating Producer Dojo and amassing this online community of hundreds of producers that are all showing up to the same online places to learn similar things, get a shared vocabulary. Just things become part of the culture. Now you just have to say, oh yeah, throw a drop rack on that. And like 95% of the people around the community know exactly what that means and just can like make their drops hit harder. And, you know, same thing like with all these people in that Dallas scene that I was talking about, where it's like the older generation schooled the younger generation coming up and made sure that, you know, okay, we made all these mistakes and we did this shit right. Know that when you're coming up so that you can build on top of what we did.
Yeah. Man, our kids are going to be fi.
One at a time, fellas.
All you, Evan.
I was just going to say, yeah, I don't think it takes away at all from the work that you have to put in to get good. Like, yeah, like if your dad was doing hip hop and you love hip hop and you want to do that too, you definitely have a leg up just because you have that community built into your life, right? But it doesn't replace the work that it takes to get good at coming up with lyrics and get good at coming up with rhyme schemes and perfecting your flow and your timing and everything. Like all of that you still have to put in the work regardless. But what you said earlier about the baseball players and like the ones that are like born in this certain time window, like it's all the same concept, right? Because Mozart's dad for sure told him that he was a prodigy when he was a little kid, and he believed it for sure. And so he delved his entire life into writing symphonies, much like any other kid that when you're a little dude or little girl and you're told that you're good at something and you like doing that thing, you're going to keep doing that. Like you're going to feel like it's part of your identity. And so you're going to continue to work really hard at that thing because it is connected to who you are as a person and you take a lot of pride in that thing. I mean, it's like that example I think Dylan mentions where like there's the 3 groups of kids, kindergartners or something like that. They were all told to paint. And one group was just told to paint whatever, doesn't matter. One group was told to paint, and then like the teachers came around and like told them like, oh my god, what beautiful paintings you're making, like wow, you're such an artistic person, like these are amazing. And then this other group was told to paint, and if you finish a painting you'll get candy or something like that. And so the group that was told to paint for candy just made complete aberrations just to get candy. The group that was there was nothing else done, that was just what it was, it ended. And the group that was told like, wow, you guys are such artistic little kids, like this is amazing, you guys are artists. The kids from that group actually had a significantly higher percentage of them that grew up to do artistic endeavors, which is so fascinating. But it all goes back to starting that thing that you're working on, which 20 minutes ago or whatever, when we started this thing, we said we were going to talk about. So it's probably moved to that. So
I was really enjoying how much we just took a sharp left and ran with the this is what we're going to talk about today, humans. Scourge!
Pioneer times.
Full blame for that with my
I think it's a pillar of our podcast.
I am really glad too you brought up that study, because it just goes to show, like, when you have that support and that push behind you, it just makes it that much easier to get into that flow state. And when you're in that flow state, the challenge doesn't seem so daunting. Like, to write interesting 3, 4, 5-minute songs, you need to write an interesting 1 to 2 minute thing, for example, right? And if in the beginning you don't know anything that you're doing when it comes to song structure, arrangement, all that kind of stuff, but you're just doing it because it's fun, and somebody told you like, hey, you might have something here to mess with, you're going to write 100 of those shitty 1 to 2 minute pieces of music that is then going to serve as the foundation for you to go do everything else. But if you're just coming into this and you're like, oh man, like I suck at this, but I got to learn it, there's this mountain I got to climb here, let me just bang out 100. Like, you're not, first off, it's going to be a big struggle to get past that point to where you now have that foundation, but you're also just going to burn yourself out so much more than if you just had fun with it. And like that's such a huge part of the flow state is, not feeling overwhelmed by the challenge. And I think having somebody say you're good at this takes away a lot of that overwhelm. And it's also the same reason, like, we've talked about this before, but if people are having trouble finishing music, like, just solidify down some of the variables. You don't need to like concern yourself with all of the choices that can be made and all of the different arrangements and all of the different effects at your disposal. Like, just do what you can, just drill that and get feedback and find out, like, what are people telling you that you do well, and sort of figure out, like, within that, what do I do well and what do I enjoy doing, and have that propel you forward. Because the other route is like so much more daunting and mentally draining. Like, it's just going to be much harder to get to that same point.
Yeah. And I also think that speaks to the importance of like putting aside a whole day to write a song, because in that whole day, you're going to get a complete draft before you have time to stop and think about where this fits in musically, or bouncing a snippet to show your friends, like, is this sick? Because like, one of them could be like, yeah, it's not really my thing. And then like this thing that you might have loved, you just don't have the passion to take it to the finish line. Whatever it is, I think that coming up with an entire rough draft of that song that you started on that day is so important, because it doesn't allow time for you to overthink it or rethink why you're doing it. It's all purely just based on like, this is cool, where's this taking me, until it's a whole thing. And then you couldn't deconstruct that whole thing and construct it a different way without ruining it. So it's like that song is either something that now, listening a week later, you're like, this is sick, I have to finish this, or you're like, this whole, like, I like this song, but it doesn't speak to the thing that I'm trying to do. But regardless, you have a complete piece of work that is like, not, that will stand by its own regardless, and you're going to know that that thing is going to work for you or not. But if you take it halfway and it could have worked really well, and then you bounce it and show someone and they're like, man, it's not really like, what I think you're good at, then like you're not going to work on that thing, even if that could have been your breakout song. So speaking we'll try this again. So speaking of starting a song and finishing it in one day, that starts with starting the song. So Tesko, let's start with you, man. How do you, first off, when's the last time you spent the whole day to work on music? I'm atting you right now. And
Man,
when you did, how did you start said song?
Let's see. Definitely was one of the days this month, maybe a week or two ago. I honestly try to, as often as I can, like batch anything that's unrelated to like sort of my days when I already have shit going on, instead of like taking some rest after, which is both good and bad because definitely can lead to burnout, as I learned last year. But I try to get in those kind of sessions very often. And after what we talked about, I think a lot of that came from just being super into music growing up and like getting some good feedback on that. Like it feels like a worthwhile investment to take that whole day. So it is something I do quite often. Man, I want to say it wasn't more than 2 weeks ago. I sat down and worked on 2 songs and did that for like 10, 11 hours maybe. And generally my process is I like to start from the melodic content and sort of build from there. I've just found, personally, melodies and chords and that kind of stuff is something I picked up from the metal world when I was playing on guitar, and it's just something that comes really easy to me. And it's one of the things that sort of got me in at the dojo. Was like all of the more melodic kind of stuff that I was doing. And so, whether it was objectively better or not, that's just sort of the feedback that propelled me more in that direction. So I feel like I always start there, because if I can get good chords, and we've talked about this, right? But like if you can get good chords and build some sort of melody on that and create some sort of movement on top of that, then it's really easy to move forward from there and sort of extend the whole idea across the, frequency distribution from your low end to your high end, filling it up with like layers and atmospheres and effects and all that kind of stuff. But generally, I always tend to start from the chorus section or the drop and sort of cap the level of intensity, because the way I think about it is like there's so many differing songs within and across genres that sort of cap out at a different level of intensity. So if you take a super minimal track like Bad Guy by Billie Eilish is at a way chiller intensity than like fucking something by Whitechapel, for example, right? So like if you think about how to really make that section pop, it means that every other section beneath that in your arrangement needs to follow some sort of progression of intensity. And I'll sort of think of like a quote unquote arrangement hierarchy and sort of map out like 2, 3, 4 sections from when I have that main kind of drop idea, and just minimize that drop idea in a few different intensities like move some elements, further back in the field of depth, remove some stuff, whatever. And then I'll try to get a couple section progression leading up to whatever that climactic section is. And then generally how I tend to go about it is like, let me find some elements now that are unique to each of these sections to further differentiate that, when you hear this sound, we're in the verse. And when you hear this transition, we're going into the pre or the build, right? And then the second half of the drop or the chorus is going to have this specific vocal melody or these specific basses that only get used in these sections. So it's like, now I have the theme. Let me give it like unique identifiers. Like the way I kind of think of this, and maybe it's not the best analogy, but it's like if you're going to like Italy, like everything is Italy, but obviously within Italy. But as you're going through, like you're going to try out different stuff on that trip. You're going to see different sites, and there's going to be different unique identifying factors to like the different regions, right? You could see like the Colosseum, you could see, basically like all these different aspects that Italy has to offer. And then when you reflect back on that trip, you're like, oh, I remember, when we landed here, we saw this kind of stuff. And then we went to see this. And then, we went to Venice and we were by the canals and blah, blah, blah. And your song in a lot of ways is like this auditory journey. So I think about like, what kind of landmarks can I set in each section so that when somebody's thinking about this as like a front to back piece, there are like milestones within that. And then from there, I typically, I see it as like, if I can get that first half of the song down, then I can work off of repetition and variation to create that second half. So it's like really dialing in that first half that's like key to me. And if I'm just having a day where I demo stuff out, I'll just, straight up take that first half, copy it over, make minimal changes. And then if I'm really going in on the track, I want to be throwing, more curveballs. Like if you're going to see, Venice twice, like maybe the first time you took the little gondola excursion and the second time you like really, checked out the restaurants or whatever. Like typically if you're going to the same place, you're going to be checking out different aspects of it. And like, if you're seeing Venice as part of your trip, if you just saw like the same thing 5 times, it wouldn't stick out as a memory as much as if you like really explored like everything the city has to offer, for example. So that's kind of how I think about it. I try and set like the foundation and figure out like what is going on, what am I trying to get across, and then what identifiable parts work really well. Maybe it's a certain like interval over this chord progression or a transition or a timbre of sound that works really well with this. And I'll try and find a couple of those that are unique to the track and then figure out sort of how to present those in an appealing way.
So what you're saying is that you start with the sols and then you figure out whether you're going to make pizza or pasta from that sauce. And then you're either going to make it really spicy for the drop, or you're going to tame it down with more of a savory flavor for the verse. Did I get that right? Is that the analogy that you said?
Kinda. But basically what I'm getting at with that is like, if the peak of the trip is seeing the Colosseum or going to Venice, then there shouldn't be anything throughout the trip that happens that is more exciting than that. Like if you're recalling the story, that should be the thing that comes to mind. So like if you have a drop that's very laid back, but then your verse is like all these crazy bass sounds in your face, way more stuff going on, then it might not be so obvious that that was the main point of the trip, so to speak. So I just find, if we're starting, like at some sort of arbitrary point in the middle and working both up and downwards, I found in the past I would have so many ideas where I just wouldn't know where to take it from there. Versus like, if I figure out exactly what I'm trying to say or what I'm trying to see, what's the most memorable part, then it's so much easier to make everything else less exciting and further away and reduced from that. So I'll try, I guess, to sort of bring everything back together is like, I'll really spend a lot of time on that melodic content and make sure everything is as filled out as possible and as grand as possible to give me the most amount of parts to play with, so that I could stretch it out over a longer period of time and sort of trickle out the best parts of that as we reach those climactic sections.
Yeah. I mean, my terrible analogy on top of your good analogy aside, what you said is absolutely true, is that if you have the maximum set, it's really easy to work down from there. But if you start in the intro and you build up to pretty much a sonic maximum in that intro, just because it's the natural tendency when producing to fill the page, and you build up a sonic maximum, it's really hard to make the next thing feel even bigger when you've already made this first thing so big. Doesn't really make sense. And I do 100% agree with you. Starting with the melodic content, like if I can write some chords in the Ableton grand piano that like make me feel something, I guarantee I can take pieces from just those chords and build out every other piece of that song that I need. Resample a bass line from the bottom note, create a drop from that is going to feel like it came from the same emotional context as the rest. But if you start with some real solid chords and melody, you have everything that you need. What about you, Luke? How do you do it?
So I just pulled up my SoundCloud list of private tracks to jog my memory on how I've been making tracks. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know I don't set aside whole days. I fuck off entire nights of stuff I thought I would be doing and write songs instead when the inspiration strikes me. So I'll be like, yeah, I'll probably like do some video editing and like answer some emails and whatever. And then like 7:30 p.m. I get an idea, and next thing you know, it's 5 a.m. and I have a sick first draft of this track. That's usually how my best songs go. As far as actually like setting aside that time in advance, I have actually not been on that at all. Just because I have so many other things in my life right now, like producing a podcast and, video editing and keeping up with social media and figuring out how to run Facebook ads and shit, that like I actually have to schedule myself on to like make sure I do that shit, because they become much more urgent when you tell yourself there's a schedule. But then as soon as I have a night where I'm not scheduled and like, oh yeah, I'll probably get to some of this tertiary shit, and then I get an idea. Like I'm looking at this one, I've got this track called "I Want You Now" that I think I finished a lesson, and it might have been like 8 p.m. This is in December, and I go to the bathroom, and then I wash my hands, and I'm walking back, and I start just like humming this little bass line in my head. I'm like, ooh, that's kind of fun. And I got back to the studio and it was still looping in my head. So I was like, all right, that's a sign. I haven't forgotten it yet. It's catchy. I like it. And so I grabbed, quick turned on Reason, set up the mic, and I just figured out what tempo it was and started going boom, 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 boom. Boom. And I was like, oh, it's got the little bendy on it. I like it. Just Jack Black. But then so I laid that down, and then all of a sudden I got an idea for little beatbox drums, and I beatboxed the drums, and I was like, all right, what else do I got? And I drug the audio, copied it onto a MIDI track, cleaned up the MIDI, turned that into a serum patch, and made a clean sub bass. And then I duplicated the serum and grabbed a wreath that Rip Kenny made. From a very special hyperdrive pack coming to a hard drive near you if you buy it soon. And then that was sounding really cool. And then I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna need some more sounds. Let me see what else layers in here on top of this stuff. And I just started going super loop method on it. I had that 8 bars looped, and then I was like, all right, cool. Like, oh, this is like a really cool like electric piano Rhodes kind of patch with some warble on it. And I dropped that in there. And then
And then I built out some drums around that accented the beatbox. And then I started building out the song. I was like, all right, I'm definitely probably going to start with just the electric piano because that like sounds really good by itself. And then I'll layer in the sub and the beatbox and the drums. And then I'll like build the drums up a little bit. And then I'll have a little breakdown here. I don't know how that's going to go quite, but then when it drops in, I know I'm going to like bring back that re-space for sure. And, you know, kind of did a little rough arrangement of the track. And at that point I was like, okay, this is definitely something. I'm still enjoying it, you know, however long later this is. What else do I got? And I look over here and I've got my little mobile talk box that I don't use enough and I really want to get more use out of. So I put that on and I started jamming and I came up with some notes I liked. And then the notes kind of influenced the lyrics. And that's where I came up with the I Want You Now. And so I started like, ooh, I want, you know, I just had a talk with my girlfriend where, you know, we're long distance and, you know, she was like saying to me, oh, I miss you, you know, when we're seeing each other on the weekend, but that's not soon enough. I want you now. And so I took that as inspiration to, I mean, I'll make it like a love song, you know, but like, oh, you know, I want, you know, a longing, yearning kind of love song. And so I like wrote a couple of little lyrics and I put that on and then that kind of fell into what the buildup was going to be. And I was like, oh, I'll just repeat the word now and keep hitting the same note and getting faster and faster on that for the buildup. And then I just like freestyled a few takes of like melodies and, you know, variations on the lyrics. I freestyled like 5 takes over the drop to kind of suss out. And then I just spent the rest of my time kind of like cutting it down and cutting it back and finding the best little moments that I wanted to comp together for the drop lead. And then realizing like, oh, this like cool, like trippy, super glitchy one, I'm actually going to throw right before the intro. And, oh, this, I'm going to actually take this layer out here and put it in there and just basically, you know, building it up off of the super loop. You know, that's one way that works really well for me, basically combining, you know, the super loop method, again, starting with a really strong melodic, that I was then able to, you know, like the changes aren't crazy here. And I was able to figure out chords that worked with it. And then I had melody and chords that I could then, you know, put in a few different ways. And like you said, made my super loop, which had the subs and all of the layers, all of the drums, the, you know, the beatbox and the little mouth bass line were still tucked in there in the final version of the song. You know, all of it was there. And then I was like, okay, that's basically my drop loop. And then, like you said, I found the ceiling of the, you know, the intensity with that. And, you know, even kind of up that a little bit by adding the lead line over it with the talk box. But then I just de-escalated from there to get the parts of the song that came before that. I'm like, all right, like this is clearly the intro. The intro plus these two things is the verse. Switching that piece out for that piece makes it the breakdown. Like take away the drums, turn down the sub a little bit, you know, swap out the electric piano for the mouth bass, and, you know, and then throw a little like riser and a little drum build-up loop in there, you know, and like just do the things we practice. And it turned out really good. I'm a real big fan of that song at this point. But then there's like other tracks where one of my other favorite tracks, straight up arrangement exercise. And that one came about completely different. I like was finishing up doing track feedback for a Ninja, and then like was like writing that feedback after the third time listening through their track or whatever, typing everything out, hit send. That song ends, random next song plays on SoundCloud. And I'm like, this is fucking banging. I never thought to do like a halftime hybrid trap song at 110 BPM, but I'm about to tonight. And they had like free download for email sign up. So boom, now I own that song. It's definitely going to be in some DJ sets right next to the song I made like it. And on that one, I started by just reconstructing what the drums are doing through both drops. And then I really studied what their subs were doing and wrote a similar sub line that had, you know, a lot of bendies in it. and then once I had like the rhythm section really laid down, I was like, all right, what are they doing for the melodies? You know, I'm like, they're doing it in a chromatic key. I don't really want to write chromatic. I want to write in F, and because that's the main bass note I picked. And so I write, you know, it's got a bit of a different bounce, you know, build out the build out the melodies and then put in the bass wubs for the turnarounds and then put in the tom fills, right? Tom fills in the same spots they got tom fills, and, you know, completely came at it from a different angle, but, you know, also came up with a song I really like. And they're very, very different songs.
Yeah. So if you listen to this podcast, you now know that unless Luke starts with an arrangement exercise, it started in the bathroom, because he either got out of the shower and he had a melody in his head, or some other time he was in the bathroom, he got a melody idea. But bathroom and melody sounds like that's the secret sauce for you.
Amen,
Man,
man.
there actually is a science to that, where your brain is in a very specific state when you're sort of, you know, preoccupied with the task that isn't taking too much mental energy, like being on a walk, taking a shower, especially like
Driving.
Driving. Anytime, especially, you know, when you can't get to the dot immediately, is sort of when you get all these ideas flowing to you. And one thing I found, just as a side note, because I'm curious to hear your side, Evan, as well. But I feel like last year I really killed my creativity by trying to fill in every moment of silence with listening to music or you know, like YouTube videos or stuff like that. If I was in the shower or washing dishes or whatever, like taking some time to just actively be in silence and be bored, like when you're doing dishes or you're eating, or, you know, just before bed, like just taking some time to just sit and chill and be a bit zen, has really like resulted in some amazing ideas and catapulted some sessions forward that probably wouldn't have come about otherwise. But
Yeah, man. Yeah, for sure. On that note, I was actually thinking about making an EP of these type of songs, just calling it Showers.
Nice.
Luke Rain, Showers.
It's on brand.
Oh yeah.
Without very young.
All right, Evan, how do you like to start songs? All right, and I'm cutting you off saying something else. You just go for it.
I will get to that very shortly, but I do 100% agree with you, Tesko. I think that your mental bandwidth, your subconscious bandwidth, is like one of the most important tools that you have. And as much as you can, try and fill the things that you are actively thinking about with the stuff that you care about, not what that person at work emailed you in a snarky tone that you're pissed off about, because then your subconscious is going to think about all the ways that you wish you could tell them off via email that you'll never do. And all of that mental bandwidth that could have been thinking about why that rhythm of that melody doesn't quite hit right. Then when you lie down to go to sleep at night, instead of having the melody that's going to work pop into your head, you're going to have some thought about work email pop into your head. That's not what you want. So as much as you can, really try and take a concerted effort to not fire those thoughts about these things that seem important that aren't, and instead replace that with firing thoughts about all of these songs that you're working on that you want to improve, because those moments of clarity that happen in the shower when there's no music happening, and all of a sudden that thing that you were working on, the fix like just pops into your head like that. Those are the kinds of moments that are just pure gold. That you do kind of have to cultivate a mindset, or like, you know, tend to your mental garden, as ill.Gates would say, that is going to bear the fruit of the things that you actually want to have pop into your head in those times. It's super important and very underrated.
Yeah, and that's
for any field, really.
And that's why, like, again, like journaling is so key. Like to just be able to like trap those thoughts on a piece of paper and allow yourself the time and space to actually express them and explore them and hopefully work through them. You all of a sudden have like cleaned the slate of those types of, you know, nagging annoyance thoughts. and then, you know, you get to go about your day with just like a little less weight on your shoulders and a little more space, you know, making the proverbial clearing for the ideas to come into.
Yeah, 100%. So for me, when starting a song, like I mentioned earlier, it's almost always chords, whether that be in the Ableton grand piano, coming up with something that moves me with just the most stock sounding instrument there is, or with an init patch and Serum, writing some chords in that. I've actually found that the more that I do it, the more I stray away from even the init patch, because even that init saw wave patch has a certain quality to it. Like I find myself hitting like power chords and stuff a lot more with that saw wave patch, just because the tone is so rich with it and the dissonance doesn't sound quite as good as on a stock grand piano. You can throw two notes a half step away from each other and there's like more of a quality that sounds good about that. And I like the chords that I write that have a little bit of natural, like, call it like at risk of sounding like the Hans Zimmer masterclass commercial. This is a question and here's an answer. A bit of a dodgy question. Like you have to have those things that like kind of lead your thought about this emotional context different ways, right? You have to have dissonance and resolution. And then I find that when I write in that init patch, I stray away from the initial dissonance that doesn't lead to a pleasing resolution. And pro tip, if you have some sort of like string library, like you can get away with even more dissonance with strings than you can in the grand piano. So if you're trying to write something really sinister, start with some sort of string library patch, because then you can get really weird with it before it sounds like garbage. So yeah, always start with that. Or honestly, nowadays, a lot of my songs start with just guitar riffs or phrases or whatever, just because with quarantine, I've spent so much time trying to get better at guitar that it's just more fun for me to start with that. And it's like what I've been trying to do forever, but have not been good enough to like feel like I can consistently write something the day of that is good enough to work from on a whole song. That being said, starting with chords, I prefer to write the chords or whatever like the night before. Say I have a Saturday blocked out for music, like that Friday night. Maybe the girl's gone to bed and the girl, my wife.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Because I like to say like my girl, like I like the way that sounds, but then the girl,
my girl,
not the same. That's not the same. Anyways,
moving on.
My significant other has gone to bed, and I am not tired yet. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go out to the studio, write some chords or something. And if I write something that moves me the night before I have a writing day, oh man, like those are the days that the best song happens, because then I wake up the next day, I have my starting place, and everything just falls into place really quickly. The amount of times that actually happens that way has been maybe 2 or 3 times in my career of writing music. Like it's rare that like I land on something with a short amount of time writing those chords that actually is like the thing that I want to work with. And also if I write, like I always like try and write chords and stuff in nighttime sessions that I'm gonna work from, and I think that I'm gonna have this huge bank of chords and stuff to work with. Normally, when I write that chord progression, that's like, oh damn, this is it. Like that doesn't stick around in my library. Like the next day, I clear my schedule, and that song is getting written. Like that doesn't stick around in a folder that doesn't get used. So, but that being said, like if you can spend all of those times in your nighttime session to write those chords that are going to be your starting place, like that is going to make a huge difference for you. But if I don't have anything, I'm going to sit down that day and try and write something that moves me in the morning. I think I'm probably a minority here in the fact that it takes me, if I don't have anything to work from already, probably hours, like 2 or 3 hours to find chords or something that sparks me enough that I'm like, okay, this is going to be sick. And from like my rough draft takes 20 hours on the same day. Like I wake up at 8 or 9 and I'm done at 5 in the morning. Like it just takes me forever to get a rough draft out. That being said, I think that is in large part due to the fact that like I know that I need something that grabs me before I start taking that thing and making the song. Because if I don't have the thing that grabs me when I'm starting, it's like you are what you eat, right? Like if you eat Doritos and drink Mountain Dew, like your body's like, and that's all you ate, like your body's probably not going to function that well. Like, because what your body is functioning, all of your actions are stemming from your fuel that is Doritos and Mountain Dew. Like you need the starting place, the thing that everything else derives from to be quality, and then that will turn into a quality finished piece of music. So I mean, even like, oh man, even when you have good chords sometimes, so for me it goes chords, and then those chords inform what the drop is going to feel like the bass line from those chords then turns into the drop, or if it's more of a melodic drop, like informs the melodic sense of that drop. And so chords, and then I write the drop. Kick, snare, loop is the only drums that I have in there. And then I need to find some sort of pleasing combination of sounds and patches, and maybe some, almost always some sort of resample, until I find something that's like, okay, these are the cool bits. This is the stuff holding down the main parts. And there's always this like critical mass point in writing that drop, where with just a kick snare and the things that I'm checkerboarding and call and responsing with, like there's a point at which you listen back to that and you're like, okay, this is going to work. And then everything just runs from there. But sometimes I started at 8 in the morning and it's 5 in the evening, and I still don't have that thing that I'm like, yeah, I need to run with this. But if I set aside that whole day to make music, I'm not just going to like hang it up. Like that's what I put this on my calendar to write a song. I'll be damned if I don't have a song before I go to bed. And a lot of times you'll find like at that point of like, oh, I think I'm just going to quit today. If you just take a 5-minute break, 10-minute break, like just step away from your computer, go throw the ball for your dog, go, walk around, something to let your subconscious mind just mull, sit with the things that you've been working on and come back to it. Like you'll break through that resistance at some point. And it's like recently I had a song that was like 10 at night, and I still didn't have that thing that I was like, okay, this is going to work. And took a 5-minute break, 10-minute break, came back and landed, like, I was like, what if I tried this? And landed on that thing right away. And then I was like, okay, off to the races. This is sick. So I'm taking a really long time to explain this. So hopefully you guys are still not asleep at home or in your car listening to this. But this is the most important part, because the rest of the song, once you have the emotional context of the chords and the maximal section, like we talked about, that is going to work, everything else from there is not nearly as hard. So then the rest is just off to the races, coming up with the other parts from those chords that make sense for this section or that section. And then the rest of the time until I'm dead tired and need to fall asleep. But the thing is, like, when you're in flow state, like, at least for me, I don't get tired. Like, it just doesn't happen. Like if you're in the zone on something, the hours just melt away. And those hours spent doing that, or when you get done and you're like, oh God, this is sick. Like you feel really good about yourself. You feel accomplished. You finished a thing, a rough draft of a thing. You know that there's a thing there that you can come back to later and finish that isn't going to be disjointed because you're no longer adding critical parts at a later time. And then the rest of the time is really just spent figuring out those little details that make it special, like resampling a fill and reversing it with reverb or whatever, and like having these moments that like pull and push into and out of each other, and like just the little other spices that make that song unique and interesting. But it all starts with that emotional context, figuring out those that core of the song that really moves you, and then branching out from there. So not too different from you guys, but it sounds like it takes me about 3 times as long.
I mean, it depends too, like, but also like look at the output. Like, man, like you write some fucking incredible songs that impress the absolute shit out of me. So like, yeah, you see the whole struggle process on the way to getting that, but the result is sick as fuck. So, take that to heart, because, like, I mean, but, we've had this kind of, debate too, and, philosophical back and forth about like whether or not one should, or at what point in a career and skill level should one really take the time to make sure this is an incredible idea. Because if, my argument is, if you need to learn how to do the process, like that bar can be lower for how amazing this idea is. Because if you have no idea how to finish a song, period, and you only wait until the most amazing inspiration comes along to attempt to finish a song, you won't be able to anyways. So there's kind of like a sliding scale. And we were speaking on this last night, actually, off, when we weren't recording. And Evan made a really good point. Like, it's something that excites you here now. It doesn't have to be the most amazing thing that's ever musically happened. It has to be a musical thing that is exciting enough for you to keep moving and get in that flow state. And that bar will continually raise. Like, the first day I made a beat, it was like, holy shit, the MIDI made a melody. I'm going to put drums on it. I didn't think about whether it was a good melody. I was just excited that I made a melody and could get FL Studio version 2 demo to work that day. But now it was like, man, if I'm not inspired, I'm just going to edit the podcast and make sure that's popping, because that shit's definitely coming out on Tuesday. And then on another night, it was like, oh shit, this arrangement exercise I just decided I'm about to do is happening because that person's song grabbed me. I've made arrangement exercises that I love and I'm definitely releasing, and I've made a lot that I am definitely not releasing, but I'm glad I did them because I learned a lot through the process. And I've had nights where I came out of the shower with an idea that I spent a bunch of time on that did not pan out, but I'm still glad I did them. I was excited about that idea in the moment, enough for me to spend the time in the DAW to learn a lot of shit. And that's like that caveat, like, yes, absolutely. Make sure it's something that's inspiring, but don't overthink it. Also, if you're in a place where you just got to actually like put your 10,000 hours in, to circle it back to the front of the podcast.
Accurate, dude. Very, very good qualification there. As the skill has progressed in producing, my bar for something that for lack of a better way to say it, the bar for something that impresses myself continues to go up. And so like to get to that thing that excites me, that I'm working on, like that bar goes up. Like it used to very much, for like the first 4 years of producing, was like definitely under a half hour to come up with something that I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely cool. Like I'm going to build a song around this. Like like you said, the bar for what excites you constantly changes, and don't feel like you have to start with the most masterful thing ever if you're not super well versed in the whole process yet. Find something that excites you that you could see making a song around and move with that, finish that rough draft, and move on to the next thing. It's always going to be a varying level for wherever you're at in your production journey. It's never the same.
Yeah,
Amen.
and you'll likely pick up on some stuff in those sessions which will make you want to go in for hours at a time and further explore those possibilities. So, I always think of the if you guys have seen that marble sculpture, and it was like going viral for a bit. People were like, I don't know how they made stone look so soft, and it was like this like woman's head with like a veil over it, and you could see like all the fine details, and it looked like as if it was actual like silk from the detailing, and it just looks super soft. But the thing is, like, do you need that level of detail to make a marble sculpture that is something somebody would put in their house? No. Do you need to be amazing with geometry and angles? Again, no, not necessarily, but it helps. And then it's like, well, can you do any of that before you even know how to like take the hammer to the little thing? And it's like, well, no, right? And nobody's going to put a marble block in their house. So there's this sort of like arbitrary middle point where it's like you could be somewhere in the middle and still create something that's beautiful that people would want to have. But then there's also still all that time that needs to be spent playing around with like adding all of those details. So when you do get that inspiration for, that person with the veil on it, and you want to make that look super, super delicate and soft, it's like you don't just do that because you had the idea. You sort of need to still drill that in to get to that point. So when the inspiration hits, you know how to execute on that.
Yeah, and I think we can all pretty safely assume that person that made a sculpture that looked like real cloth, they fucked up plenty of slabs of stone.
That part.
Many slabs. They've probably even gotten 95% of the way done with something they thought was great and just made a sloppy, chunky hit with their little hammer and ruined the whole thing and wanted to quit and felt like they weren't good enough and that they would never make the thing that in their head was perfect. That happens to everyone in all fields. And the thing that when what you just said, Luke, reminded me of was there's no wasted hours in the DAW. Like, you can sit down and write an absolute piece of garbage, but you probably found some sample in your library that you liked in that session, or you made a really cool sound and you thought you were going to make this magnum opus of a piece with it, and it just didn't pan out. But that's still a cool sound. You can still use that other places. Or even if literally everything you made was trash, you still ingrained the habits of working in your DAW that is going to build your speed, build your natural flow in that program to get faster and better. And that's all building on itself. And
hopefully, not to just a quick point, but like hopefully you can reflect on that as well and be like, man, I got caught up at this point in the process, or I executed very poorly on that, or this didn't turn out how I thought it was going to turn out. And all of that gives you a basis to move forward from and make that next session better.
Yeah. And also, like, one thing that just popped into my head, when you don't need to be at the skill level that you want to hit that flow state where the hours melt away. Like what we were just talking about with like the bar for the thing that excites you to start working on a song, like that flow state would happen even on the first song that I ever made. when I was making absolute garbage music, trash toilet flush music, like you still, if there's something that excites you and you hit that flow state and the hours melt away, like that is the goal, regardless of what skill level that you're at. Like as long as you are committing to your process, those are the sessions that are fun. Those are the things that reinforce why you're doing it. And so like, let that be your guide for when you're working on something and you really like this one little thing that you added. Like, don't think too hard about it. Like, if it excites you, like, roll with it, get in that flow state, continue to make that thing. You know, at the end of the day, it may or may not be your favorite thing that you've ever made, but as long as you were committing to that process, you're building good habits in how to go about it and reinforcing the process of getting through the draft, right? Because that's the hardest part, getting through the entire building of the song. And then it's sharpening your swords at mixing and engineering and mastering and all those things to finish the song. But the creative struggle that is working on a song for 2 hours one day, coming back the next day, what can I add? Adding something for an hour, coming back the next day, what can I add? And having 5-6 different sessions of an hour long working on a song. Those are the songs that I would get done with and be like, this just doesn't feel right. Like there's cool parts in here, but it doesn't feel like the song that I want it to. And that's because you're just in a different state of mind every time that you sit down to write music. So following your intuition and getting that full draft out, no matter how you start the song, is, in my opinion, the most important thing.
Amen. So the moral of the story is, go forth and fuck up blocks of marble, my friends.
You just got to send it. You got to completely break your giant, expensive piece of marble that some rich, drunk asshole financed for your art career, and you aren't going to be able to pay them back, and you're going to go into a debt spiral. That's going to happen. You just gotta pick up the next piece of stone financed from that person and start again. I don't know where I was going with that.
Sometimes,
i.e., disappoint your parents.
You accidentally break a piece of marble in half. You've got 2 small pieces of marble to carve out of now. Like,
Life
you know,
hacks.
and you go hard at some shit, and like you came away with some knowledge. Like, oh man, don't hit it on that seam, you'll break the marble. Or like, oh man, like when I added that shit to the song, it kind of messed up the song. Like, but you're gonna come away with that knowledge, the experience, but also like there's pieces of that song you might like in a month when you open it. You're mad at that song tonight because it didn't turn out, but like you open it up in a month and be like, actually, those chords, I really hate the drum beat I put on this. That's what's fucking up. But those chords, though, take those chords and go make something else. Like, you don't even got to buy marble for this shit. You already bought the DAW once. You're good.
You make a really good point there about the taking something away that you shouldn't do from that song that didn't work out. Like, that has actually, looking back, I think been one of the smallest increments of change over the course of getting good at production that has made the biggest difference. And that's just learning, when you add something, like, do you need to actually delete that thing now? Like, for the longest time, when you're a beginner or even an intermediate level producer, you spend a couple hours working on something, that lead sound or that bass that you're like, this should be sick. Like, I spent all this time working on it. Like, it's got to be in there. Like, your intuition for when it actually shouldn't. Like, even if that entire project went wrong, if you built your intuition 0.01% better on, you know what, looking back, I probably shouldn't have tried to shoehorn that main bass sound into my drop. That the whole thing just went south there. Like, that is such a worthwhile realization, Because at the end of the day, that intuition on what should be and shouldn't be in that song is like the biggest thing that is going to lead you to making better music. I can say with 100% confidence for myself that as I've gotten better, less pieces remain in that song. Without a doubt. Less
Amen.
stuff makes
Yeah.
it to the final product.
I second that.
Yeah. And then once you realize that, you realize I actually don't have to write as many pieces as I thought I did. It sounded like that song was 90 pieces. So I put 90 pieces in there and realized I could not make sense of the mess. And then you realize, oh no, it was like one piece that they did like a skillful mud pie on and added cool little turnarounds to. But it wasn't 90 things. It was one thing that had like a bunch of variations in what turns out to be a pretty like, you know, controlled chaos sort of environment. So yeah, sounds like we're wrapping it up. I feel really inspired right now. I feel like this is one of our most inspirational episodes. So thank y'all for being here again, humans. From us to you, we appreciate y'all. We appreciate y'all listening and watching and subscribing and sharing things. You know, it does not go unnoticed. We truly love y'all. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm curious too for the listeners. Drop a comment and let us know how you like to start your songs, and if there was anything you picked up from this that you want to move forward with, or if there's anything that you do that we also do. I'm very curious, and I think it will further feed the inspiration of ways to experiment with hitting that block of marble.
Exactly. Go out there and just absolutely decimate those slabs of marble, my friends. Just completely ruin them. It's the only way to get better.
Yes, sir. Peace out, y'all, and peace among worlds.
I like it. Yes, humans, thank you so much for being here with us. We truly appreciate you. Like, share, smash that subscribe button on whatever service you are listening or viewing on, and make sure to tell your friends. Let's grow this community. Now, I want to just remind you about our awesome sponsors. This is stuff we all use. First off, the EDM Cookbook. That's ill.Gates 4 essential song recipes and how to cook them up faster with timer beats. Then guest practices with Seth Drake, the best engineer we know. Your first class is free, and it will teach you all of the engineering, amazing, super high-level tricks that you need to make your songs sound incredible. And finally, Gvngaroo Records music distribution, where you can get unlimited uploads for under $10. Those links are down below. And if you want to know how to spell Bounce Gang or Gvngaroos, go to YouTube and look at my shirt. Hey, that's what's up. Peace and peace among worlds, y'all.